Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and my guest today is Jenna Marie Johnson. And she is here to talk to all of us and with me about hearing and how important your hearing is to your life and what you can do about it if you're starting to get, especially as you get older, start to lose a little bit of it every year. And so welcome, Jenna. It's wonderful to have you here. And I will let you fill in some of those blank spaces that I left open.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Jenna Johnson, and I live in Montana. I'm in the Gateway to Glacier National Park. We're on the Canadian border. If that puts it in perspective, we're a very large state. I moved to Montana actually for my job in hearing. So I had graduated college with a degree in hearing sciences and thought I never wanted to leave where I grew up and my family was. And this job fell in my lap. And I remember my parents saying, it sounds great. Just make it a year in Montana. It will look good on a resume. And here I am 15 years later. And I met my husband here, and we have two daughters, and I'm not leaving Montana. So I'm
I
still in the
bet.
same clinic as well. So I started here,
Wow.
and in October will be my 15-year anniversary. And I have the same patient care coordinator with me, and we're a great team. So we love working here. And I was just telling you that our snow finally melted and spring is here, even though we're almost to the 1st of May. So there's Montana life for you.
Yeah. No, and I was saying that my stepson lives in Montana, and so we watch the Montana weather all the time. So yeah, it's like, oh my God, it's 5 degrees. Oh
Yes.
no.
It's been a very, very cold and long winter.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we could go on about the weather too. I mean, that's a whole nother subject. We can do a whole nother
True.
podcast on that one. Okay. So let's talk about hearing
Yeah,
and how important that is to our lives and our brains and all of that.
absolutely. So we talk about hearing in the sense that it's one of the five senses and it's so
Mm,
important. And, as being in this profession, you get questions all the time of how important really is hearing. And my response to everybody is go through a day with earplugs in your ears and see how it feels to communicate. Because
yeah.
one of the follow-up questions I also get from patients is, well, is it really important that I do something about it? And what I always tell them is, you with your hearing loss on paper that I'm looking at would be like me going home and putting in earplugs. If someone came to the door or having the TV escalated or not hearing a water pipe burst in the house, those things
Oh
are
my God.
important. And we don't
Yeah.
think about the little minute sounds. We just think, oh, I can still hear my significant other. I don't need to do it. But hearing is such a bigger, broader topic than just, can I hear someone speaking to me one on one? And
Mhm.
so it is so important to address it. You know, I I know you probably have specific questions, but one of the things that comes up for me often is, at what point should we get our hearing tested? And I love the title of your podcast, because what I've told everybody for years is I recommend 50 and older. You add
Mhm.
it into your annual exams. We
Yeah.
go to our general doctor and we go to our heart doctor and we go to get an eye exam every year, but we get our teeth cleaned twice a year.
Yeah.
And no one thinks about, oh, I should get my hearing checked out. And so
Yeah.
obviously 50 is no magic number. If there's concerns or if it is hereditary, obviously go
Mhm.
sooner than that. But at 50, I always suggest just get a baseline. If it's normal,
Mhm.
wait 2 years and go back. But you never know what's going to happen with your overall health. And hearing is a part of so many different things that to add it
Mhm.
into your yearly exam at 50 and older is huge.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh no, I agree. I totally agree. Um, Yeah, I actually, yeah, I was in my upper 50s when I
Okay.
went in for mine. So, I had been talking about it. It was one of those things I'd been talking about for a couple of years, but,
Hmm.
like so many things that just,
Right.
yeah. Anyways.
Well, and to that point, it sneaks up
Yeah,
on you, right?
yeah.
Most of us don't just wake up one day and have a sudden hearing loss. Yes,
Mhm,
that can happen, but
mhm,
it's pretty rare. Most of the time, it's a gradual loss of hearing. And
mhm.
typically, it is a significant other saying, "You just don't hear me like you used to," that makes us go, "Oh, really?" And so that is
Yeah,
why, another reason why I say just go get it checked, is at least that
yeah,
way you have an awareness and you know what to look for.
yes,
Because typically, there's little things that we don't realize we're missing.
mhm.
Last week, I had a patient in my office who started crying because she could hear herself zip up her coat. And
Oh
she
my
said,
god.
"I had no clue my zipper made a noise." And then the
Yeah.
same patient was talking and her jaw was popping. And she's like, "I can hear my jaw popping." And I said, "Well,
Yeah,
with all due respect, ma'am, I've heard it the whole time." And she goes, "You can hear that?" And it's those little things that you
yeah.
don't realize you don't hear. You don't
Mhm.
realize, "Oh, I take a breath and I hear it." When your hearing slowly leaves, you don't realize one day, "Oh, I woke up and I can't hear myself take a breath anymore. I must have lost my hearing." And
Yeah,
so those are all things that we should pay attention to and kind of ask ourselves, is the world not quite as bright in the sense of hearing as it used to be?
yeah, 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 exactly. Exactly, and as I mentioned to you, and I know I've mentioned it in the podcast before, I have a hearing aid in one ear. The other one is fine,
Mhm.
and I put that into quotes, right? I mean, but I'm 68 years old, okay? It's not as good as it was when I was 50 years old.
Right.
But it's not really at the point, you know, and I have had it checked just recently. So it's
Good.
not at a point where I need it's just a matter of aging,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
there's
at
a
some
point.
point I probably will need it.
Well, and I
But
there's a point where you almost go on a watch list, if you will, right? Figure of speech there,
okay.
but where you're on that borderline cusp where, okay, it's starting to shift, but it
Uh-huh.
doesn't warrant the need of a hearing technology at this point.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
always tell patients that's when we for sure want to see you back every 12 months to recheck test and check
Yeah.
it. But I would encourage you, if at any point you said you just had it tested,
Yeah.
you feel
Oh
like
yeah.
things are changing, by all
Yeah.
means, go back sooner.
Yeah. 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 Well, like I said, not to advertise or anything, but I went and got it tested at Costco,
Mhm.
right? Which is where I had gone a year ago, actually a little bit more than a year ago. And they they don't charge for tests,
Right.
which most places don't charge for tests, right? They want to
Correct.
get you in the door.
Well, and our whole thing is, on average, it takes 7.5 years for someone to say, "Hey, I think I'm not
Mm,
hearing," before they
mm,
walk into our doors. So
yeah,
what does that
yeah,
tell you? What that tells you is it's not a fun thing. No one wakes up on a Monday
yeah,
morning and says, "I think today I'm going to go get ice cream and my hearing tested." It's not a highlight of anybody's day, right?
yeah,
We're
yeah.
nervous. We don't want to be. Let me back up. We think about it in the sense of glasses. I've worn glasses for
Ah,
years, and no one has
right,
ever looked at me and said, "Weird, you wear glasses. You must be old." But
right.
we internalize that with hearing, right? "Oh, that's what my
Mm,
grandparents wore." Or, "Oh,
got
I'm
it.
not old enough. Oh, it's not bad enough." But with eyes, you
Right.
don't say, "Oh, my vision's not bad enough. I'll just ignore it." And so
Ah, yeah, that would
back
be
to
fun, huh?
relating that with hearing, right? That's what we do.
Mhm.
No one wakes up on a Monday and says,
Yeah,
"I'm gonna go get ice cream and my hearing tested." And
yeah,
so it tells us that there's this stigma with hearing. It's not
yeah,
necessarily something that we want to deal with or we want to face the reality of. And so
uh-huh,
that's why we offer complimentary hearing exams
Right.
is to
Yeah.
take that fear away that if we
Mm.
had to charge for it, or if
Oh
we
yeah, no
did
one would
charge
do
for
it.
it, most people wouldn't come through our doors because why do I
Yeah.
want to go pay to be told I can't hear, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so there's a much bigger picture than that. But from the client's perspective or the patient's perspective, that's kind
Mhm.
of the barrier, if you will, that prevents a lot of people from coming into our door. So if we can
Yeah.
remove that by offering a complimentary evaluation, it's a lot easier to come in.
Yeah. No, and that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because a lot of people are just going to say, well, if I have to pay for it and
Right.
I hear fine, so
It's
I
not
don't
bad
need
enough
to.
yet.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like it takes that long to
No.
have a hearing test.
We allow about an hour because we
Yeah.
factor in you filling out paperwork. I'm a firm
Mhm.
believer that we've got to get to know each other. I've got to have all the
Yeah.
pieces of the puzzle before I can just say this is what you need.
Yeah.
We look in the ears, we do a gamut of different hearing tests to test the different parts of your ear and what's going on,
Mhm.
speech testing.
Mhm.
And then we want to make sure that we have the adequate time to go over the results and then
Ah,
make any
yeah.
recommendations if it's needed.
Right.
And so we do allow
Okay.
about an hour to do all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not, especially for 2 ears, that's not surprising.
No. And if it doesn't take that long, so be it. But like I said,
Yeah.
most people have quite a few questions when it comes to the actual hearing
Right.
test portion. And so we
Uh-huh.
want to make sure we have the adequate time to go over all the results.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
My biggest thing too is with it is a lot of it is all about education, right? I have to
Mm,
educate you on why it's important to hear better. I have to
yeah.
educate you on how we hear. Because if you don't lay that foundation, why would anyone move forward with a recommendation? And
Yeah.
so one of the things I tell everybody, which I'm sure you've heard this before, is we hear with both ears and the ears communicate with the brain. And that's why it's so important that if there is a hearing difficulty, we're proactive and we do something about it. Our auditory system's like any other part of our body, right? I This is a silly example, but I use it often in my office is if I
Mhm.
were to take my left arm and have it in a sling and I wore it like that for 6 months and then you say, "Hey, let's go lift weights at the gym," I'm not going to be able to do anything with that arm because the muscles have atrophied. Our auditory system's the same way. If we're not keeping it stimulated and we're not keeping
Mhm.
it active with communicating and processing sound with the brain, we actually
Mhm.
can start to lose it at a quicker pace. And then it's more of a
Mm.
shock to get it back as well. And so that's
Ah,
why we
okay.
recommend get it tested, stay on top of it. If there is a
Yeah.
difficulty, address it right away. The sooner you're proactive, the better it is for you long term. I was looking back at your past podcasts. I know you did a whole podcast on hearing loss and dementia and the connection there. Um,
Yeah.
and that's not a every time that's what happens. And I don't like
No,
to
no,
use
no.
that because it scares patients, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But going back to my point is you have to keep it all active and working together. And the more you keep your whole body physically in shape, and the brain is part of that, the less likely we
Yeah.
are to see those things develop, right?
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. But see, from my point of view, I think it's great to scare people like that because you're going to get some people who are going to come in because they are going to be scared if they
Yeah,
can, if they really can tell the difference, right?
absolutely.
I mean, I know personally, one of the reasons I wanted to go in was because I could tell using either the AirPods or just my wired, um, you know, things, um, that I had to turn the left one up
Mhm.
higher to hear it. Sometimes I couldn't hear it at all.
Yeah,
The right one was fine. The right one still is relatively fine, for my age. Um, and that's what made me go in
yep.
because I had
Well, and
figured that out. But that, then when they said, well, it could, it can affect your brain because your brain's not, and I'm sure I'm not getting this all right, but your brain needs that stimulation. And if it doesn't get stimulated, it tends to dissipate and, just
Absolutely.
goes down.
Well, and that's why, I mean, this is kind of my soapbox here, but
Uh-huh.
that's why I
Hey,
always
you've
tell
got it.
patients,
You've got the soapbox.
perfect. I always tell patients, I'm like, if you're going to invest in hearing technology, wear
Mhm.
them. There is nothing more frustrating to me to know that you invested the money and they went in the top drawer of the dresser and you've not touched them since. Because from my perspective, if I don't hear from you more than once a year, I assume everything's great and that you're doing well and you love them. And then I
Yeah.
see you back for your annual and I find out that you went out and you rarely wore them. That does both of us a disservice because if you're going to invest in them, wear them. The more you wear them, the better results you're going to have. Not
Mhm.
only is it keeping your brain active and stimulated, but one of the things we hear the most in our office is when I go into groups and restaurants, I just can't hear. So when
Mm.
I go into those places, that's when I put in the hearing technology. And it's like, well, you have to retrain your brain to hear when you're not in those circumstances so that when you do go in them, it's not overwhelming because your brain's already used to hearing.
Mm.
We're
Got it.
retraining your brain to hear what you've been deprived of.
Yeah.
Uh, I always tell my clients, I'm like, you did not get to this point overnight. The hearing loss on the paper has been years in the making. So we have to adequately and appropriately retrain your brain to hear what it's been
Mm.
missing. We can't just turn on the hearing devices and say, go hear better. I hope it's not overwhelming. We've got to gradually retrain it. And that's why
Yeah.
we're pretty
Yeah.
strict on follow ups. We fit you with the
Yeah.
technology and we see you back in a week. And then,
Yep.
as you know, oftentimes you'll go back 2, 3, 4 times in a 6 week period to really dial in the sound and your
Mhm.
environment. I
Yeah.
can take 5 people with your hearing difficulty, and all of you are going to want it different because your
Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
your family that you live with, your work is completely different than the other folks.
Yeah. 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 Oh no, exactly. Exactly. And, which makes me think of actually a couple different things. But and so we were talking about what earlier, what the phone issue is
Hmm.
that I have, right? So how normal is not the right word because I know it's not the normal, but how what percentage of people have that kind of a, and is it um inherited
It
kind of
can be
thing?
hereditary for sure.
Uh-huh.
As you shared, your brother has it, you think your mom had it. It definitely can be genetics.
Mm-hmm.
How common is it? Conductive hearing losses aren't that common,
Mm.
especially in a clinic like mine. So we
Okay.
are a independent hearing office. We have two
Mm.
providers
Okay.
in our clinic. Most of the time, if you have a conductive hearing loss, it's going to be pretty sudden, and the physician will
Mm.
send you to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Um, in a
Ah, okay.
situation like yours, it's not that common that we see it, quite frankly. I can
Uh-huh.
probably count on one hand how many times in 15
Uh,
years I've had someone come in with your condition.
okay. Interesting.
And then you kind of have your decision of which route you want to go down and how you want to help yourself to hear better. Most
Mm.
patients just say, I want a hearing technology and I want to get back to hearing better. And you watch the good ear and make sure it doesn't get pulled down over time. And
Uh-huh.
it sounds
Yeah.
like you've got a great team of providers and that you're getting the
Yeah.
support you need. So that's excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it probably helps that I live in a rather large area
Yes,
with lots of cities and lots of doctors and lots of, right, all that.
you have
And
all
the
the support you need.
not to mention the technology, right? All the
Absolutely.
technology companies.
You're very
So,
lucky.
yes, yes. Oh no, exactly. Exactly. And I appreciate that. I do.
Good.
Um yeah, I it's interesting because before I before I had my test, I had no idea that that was it. even a possibility. I just assumed, oh, okay, it's just, I'm getting older and yeah. So that was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
And I do find that if, for instance, I don't have my hearing aid in and I stick one of the earbuds or whatever, or the AirPods in really far, I can hear it better,
Yep.
right? Because I assume it's because it's bypassing
A
at
couple
least
things.
part of the bone.
So you're gonna get a
No?
better seal, partly. The further in you get
Mm,
it, the better seal, so the less
okay.
noise is gonna come out of it, but also um, the more direct sound you're gonna get that way.
Mm, okay.
So I always
Okay.
tell patients you can't get your hearing technology in too far. You're not gonna
Yeah.
reach your eardrum, and the further it is and the better seated it is, the better sound quality.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the same way to your point with an AirPod.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a little bit, and I kind of wanted to touch on this about
Uh-huh.
what brought you in initially and how you knew to
Mm-hmm.
go get your hearing tested. And I suggested that my baseline's everybody 50 and older. Um,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of times there's things that we don't realize we're doing until someone points it out. But not all of us
Yeah.
have someone with us often enough to point it out. And so those are things like, always leaning. This might have been something you were doing. Were you always leaning to your
Ah.
right ear in a group? You go to lunch with friends and you're leaning in and
Uh-huh.
you're going, oh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And you're favoring one ear without knowing you're favoring one ear.
Yeah. I, I,
Uh,
I don't know, actually,
that
at this point.
happens often.
Yeah.
We touched a little bit on memory. Sometimes it's
Mm.
not memory, it's just the hearing. And I don't say just to negate it, but
Ah.
we don't
Yeah.
realize, you're talking and then they say, oh, well, I asked you to take out the garbage. Did you not do that? And you're like, oh, I didn't even hear you. It's not that I forgot to take out the garbage. I just didn't hear you
Yeah.
say, could you take out the garbage? Um, One of the other things is that we sometimes have a tendency to almost become antisocial. You mentioned this with
Mm,
your mom
mm,
that she was becoming a little
mm,
bit more depressed and maybe not showing up to the family birthdays or not answering the
mhm,
phone as often when you guys called. Those are
mhm,
things that I always look for. I looked for those in
mm,
my grandparents. I look
yeah,
for those things in my parents now of are they wanting to not necessarily be as
yeah.
much as a part of things like they used to. Um, the TV volume going up. That seems like such a simple
Uh,
thing. But once again, I touched on this
yeah,
earlier. It's so gradual that we don't really
yeah.
realize that over the last year, maybe we've turned the TV up consistently and it really is louder than what it was.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
One of the things I also is, if you find yourself that you're just laughing to laugh, you're in a conversation and you're just, everybody else is laughing. What did they say? A lot of
okay.
times it's what we call a sound void that we know that they said something and we got the
Yeah,
bulk of it, but the funny word or two that made everybody laugh, what we heard either didn't make sense to the rest of the sentence
uh-huh,
or they were just completely voided out and we didn't hear what made everybody laugh. So we're just kind of laughing to laugh
mm,
with the group.
uh-huh,
Um,
yeah,
and to that point, being exhausted after being social. This was years ago, but I had a younger woman come in and she, at her 1 week follow up, said, the biggest difference I've noticed with my hearing is I feel more rested than I have in years. And I kind of just sat
ah,
back and I was like, why do you think that is? And she said, because I'm not straining. She said, I didn't realize how
um,
much my neck was straining from leaning in one way and how much
interesting.
harder I was having to concentrate to be part of my conversations. And she said,
Uh-huh,
now I can
yeah,
sit back and and I can be a part of it again. She said, I feel more
wow.
rested and younger. She said, you just made me younger. Now, not everybody has that big of a drastic response, or not everybody has that much awareness
Thank
necessarily.
you. I was going to say who noticed it. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point.
So,
That's a
all
really
of
good point.
those things are I always say they're kind of the toolbox of what to hone
Mm,
in on. And like I said, in
mm,
those 7 years from saying, I don't think I heard that, to walking into our office, those are kind of the internal checklist of things to say, okay, is it time? Am I doing X, Y, and Z
right.
that we just talked about?
Uh-huh.
Um, because those early signs, it's easy, like you alluded to earlier, to say, oh yeah, it's just not important enough, or oh yeah, I'll deal with it next month.
Yep. Yep.
But they add up. They add up
Oh,
quickly.
yeah. No, exactly. And yes, as one gets older, almost everybody, probably 95% of everybody says, "Oh yeah, I need to go get my hearing checked at some point," but they don't do it.
Right.
I mean, I have that issue with the person who shares my house with me, shares the house with me. Um, and I am a big, you know, rah-rah cheerleader for hearing tests and hearing aids.
Yep.
Um, and and I still can't get him. Every once in a while, they'll say, "Well, why don't you make me an appointment?" It's like, great, when do you want to go? But
Yep.
it still doesn't happen.
So here's the thing.
But yeah,
Until he's ready, there's nothing
mm,
I can say to him in the office, and there's nothing you can say to him that's going
bingo.
to make him come into my door.
Yeah.
But mark my words, there will be an event that happens that
Mm,
he'll do it, and he might even do it without telling you. There always
hmm.
is. And I obviously have been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
I've had people in my office that I've just looked at and said, with all due respect, sir, nothing I say is going to make you move forward. I don't even know why we're still having this conversation. Because you know that their wife just forced them to come in, and they're checking it off their to-do list, and it's like, you don't want to be here. You could care less. I can tell you're in 100% complete denial. Let's just reevaluate next year. And they're like, oh, thank God. How'd you know that? You're like, well, I've done this a time or two.
Hello. Yeah.
Uh, but something always happens now
Mm,
that we've got
mm,
them thinking, and now that these things are
mm,
top of their mind, something always
right.
happens that typically they come back, and they come back without the person who encouraged them to come in the first place knowing. And more often than not, I live in Montana. This is for us in our area. And a lot of times it's like I didn't hear the birds, or I didn't hear the elk bugle. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
also is a tendency to be, I was at my grandson's birthday party and I couldn't hear him say, Papa, I loved
Oh,
you. And so you
oh,
start to
oh.
think about those things. And yet
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
that's why conversations like this are so important, because it brings up that awareness
Yeah.
that we don't even realize. And so it's all just about being ready.
Yeah. 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 Oh no, exactly. Exactly. And it is funny because um there have been times recently where I will have said something and he didn't answer me.
Mhm.
And and then of course it's that I didn't say it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna play that game. But it's just it's and I don't know, is it me or is it gender specific? I mean, are men more to do that? Do they do that more than women do? And that's not to say women don't do it, because it can also be a very I can't think what
Yeah, I
that
don't know that
word
I can
is,
I don't know that I can answer that one way or another,
Mm.
because I feel like in the 15 years I've been in the same location, I feel like it's shifted. Um, I feel like for
Ah,
the first half of my career, it was mainly women dragging their feet
okay,
because they
okay.
didn't want people to see them, and they didn't want their friends to know,
Ah,
and they didn't want to be the
got
old
it.
friend. And now I
Ah,
feel like women
interesting.
are the ones that want to be more socially connected, and I feel like that's really shifted, that now we don't want to miss out on conversations, and we don't want
Yeah,
to not hear the grandkids, and I don't care what it looks like, just help me to hear better. And
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. or when you go to the movies?
I have no facts to back that up.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah.
that's what I feel, at least with my office, is
Interesting.
we've kind of
Okay.
seen that switch. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that most men, they either wanna come in and do it, or they don't notice it enough that it's not affecting them. I would say it's not necessarily that they're dragging their feet, it's just, "Oh, that
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
that bad. Oh, it's
Right.
not an issue. Oh, I'm good."
Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so I think in the sense of men and women and who does it more, it's
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
totally different
Interesting.
ballparks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what it sounds like, which is not surprising, which is
Right,
not surprising because, we are different
right. And like I
in
said,
so many ways.
there's always something that, for my uncle, my
Hmm.
my uncle lives in a beautiful sunny part of the country where he golfs 362 days a year, and
Ah,
sometimes more than once a day. And for
oh my
him, what it
God.
was he couldn't hear the guys he was golfing with.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, that would do it.
So, if that's a huge part of your life and you're
Yeah.
missing out on it, if you notice everybody's laughing and I don't know what we're laughing at, then maybe that's the motivation. And so for
Hmm.
guys, there seems to be more of a pinpointed event that brings them in.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So let me ask you another question. Headphones.
Yes.
People listening to music on headphones or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, what what to look for, what to think about, I mean,
Yeah. Obviously, the higher the quality, the better,
mhm,
because you can get a higher quality sound without the volume. But
mhm,
anytime you have a direct noise that's consistent, it can be damaging
mm,
your ears, whether that's just
interesting.
music in the background or music in a headphone. And so for me, it's more about the length of time and the quality of the sound than anything. Um,
Mhm,
this was years ago, yet again, another patient story, but I had a 36-year-old
mm,
old come in, which is not uncommon or unheard of, but it's not a daily occurrence in an office like mine. We're normally the 50 and older crowd. We do have a handful of younger patients though. And she came in tears and was like, "My left ear's hearing is just gone. I don't know
mm.
what's happening." She said, "It's
Oh
been
my God.
gradual, it's not been overnight, but she's like, it's just not the same." And I said, "Okay, well, for how long?" She said, 6 months. I said, "What changed 6 months ago?" She's like, "Well, I got a new job." Well, she worked in the mail sorting room at the post office, and off to her desk on the left side was the mail sorter. And the constant ka-ch, ka-ch, ka-ch all day long caused her to have a noise notch from that. Now,
Wow.
obviously, not everybody has that, but that just goes to prove it's not always about the volume of the noise, it's about the
Okay.
consistency and the length of time as well. Obviously,
Ah,
volume, the louder it is, the more likely it
yeah,
is to damage your ears. And so that's why I always
right.
say, back to you asking if you get it in that left ear really tight, you feel like you hear better, the higher quality and
Yeah.
more direct sound better fit, the lower the volume. So that's
Hmm.
going to be better on our ears in
Okay.
general.
Okay. Okay.
But anytime you're doing anything you should yell over or you have to yell over to be heard, you should be wearing ear protection.
Mm,
I always tell people if it's one little cut on a saw, so be it. But if you're going to be out, doing multiple cuts with a saw, or if you're going to go leaf blow, if you're going to go mow the lawn, wear the ear protection, because all of that sound, we don't need to hear it. Like I said, you're going to have to yell over the noise to be heard anyways. So really, in order to have a conversation, you're going to turn off whatever you're doing. So why not protect your ears from that damage? Headphones are no different in my opinion.
yeah,
Now,
exactly. They don't protect. If anything, you're inundated even more so from the
right.
proximity.
Exactly. So, and I say that, and we live in a world where we all wear them, right? It's not like I don't wear headphones, but I also try to monitor how often I wear them and how length of time, how loud they are. Um, years ago it was all these young kids running around with their bass in their cars, shaking the windows, and now it's like you hardly hear about that. It's the headphone talk. So, I'm waiting for what it will be
Yeah.
next.
Yeah, yeah. Or when I was growing up, it was like, oh my God, they're all in the place and the bass and all that stuff, listening to the live music. And it
Yes.
was, sometimes I had to walk outside. It was so loud. It was too loud
Yep.
for me.
Yep. We did that last week. We went to a local concert and it was so loud. I looked at my husband and I said, "We're leaving. My ears are throbbing." And I
Yeah,
actually called the owner of the facility and I said, "I don't know what you did, but the acoustics on this night were awful. And there's no way you didn't damage all of our ears to some extent because it was painfully loud." Um, so I don't know. I think the older I get, the more sensitive I am to that too, though.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I had that when I was in my 20s as well, going to the concerts, actually probably even younger than that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you don't think about it. Well, I think we're probably about coming to the end of our time here, and this has been wonderful. I appreciate it, and I will also bring up, which you and I talked about a little bit before we got on, which is that there are a lot of places don't not go get your hearing tested
Right.
because you think it's going to cost you something.
Yes.
Most places, if not all places, will not charge you to test your hearing.
Or you'll have
I'm
an
sure there are
insurance
some.
benefit that will cover it.
That also true. Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Very good
You
point.
know,
Yes.
my biggest thing is hearing something that affects every aspect of your life.
Hmm.
There's no reason to not do something about it, even if that something is getting your baseline test. And
Yeah.
then you have the education and the knowledge to know. Um, like I said, not everybody's ready right away, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
there's no reason that you have to live with it.
Yes. Yes. No, no, I agree. I agree. And, if you are around 50 or if you're older than 50 and you have not had your hearing tested, then maybe you should reach out and do that just as a baseline to
Absolutely.
start with. And I don't know about where everybody else who's listening, excuse the pun there, but um, here where I live, it takes a while to get an appointment.
Hmm.
So you're probably not going to be able to walk in
Right. We
to
actually
most
discourage
places, not
walk-ins in.
all, but yeah.
Yeah.
But even so, you're not going to be able to call your medical insurance place, whoever it is that you doctor or whoever you go to or whatever. Everybody's backed up. Ever
Yep.
since we had the 3 or 4 years of COVID, all of a sudden people are, want to get their health and everything checked, and which is great. I think it's wonderful. But just so everybody knows, don't expect to call and be able to get an appointment for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Probably it might be. And if it is, then maybe you need to think about, why do they have all of these appointments?
Well, and to play
Just
devil's
kidding.
advocate to
Just
that,
kidding.
we
Yeah.
leave intentional spots for new patients
Ah,
because
that's nice.
the psychological
For that
point, yet
reason at
again,
all.
well, yet again, it takes seven
Yeah.
and a half years for you to call. And if we say, what's today, April 28th, if we say, perfect, our first opening's June 17th, studies have shown you're going to cancel.
Not gonna happen.
It's
Yeah,
not
not
gonna
gonna
happen.
happen.
We
Yeah.
have a 7 to 14-day window to get you
Uh-huh.
in and keep your appointment. So we have blocks on our schedules for
Um,
emergencies, but also for new
yeah.
patients. Our goal is always within 2 weeks you can be seen. So it doesn't always mean we're not busy. It
Well,
just
thank
means
you.
we're
That's
being
nice to know.
intentional with that.
Yeah. No, and I would hope that a lot of the other places in the country, in the world, whatever, have the same have thought that through
Yeah.
as well and understands that.
The quicker we can get you in, the more likely you are to keep your appointment and still be
Mhm.
motivated to want to know about your hearing.
Good, good. I like that. I like that. Okay, sounds good.
Any other
That's a
questions?
no. I was going to say that sounds like a great place to wrap this up.
Perfect. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
having me. It was good talking.
Yes, I enjoyed it, and I think we got some really good information out there, and for people to learn about hearing, um, because I still think it's one of those things that most people don't know about. Even if they know somebody who has a hearing aid, they don't sit down. Nobody sits down and asks me about it.
Right. Well, and most people might not know that you have one.
Well, that's true, but I tell everybody. I
There you
am
go.
not one of those people who acts like, oh yeah, I know, no problem. I don't have that. No, 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 no. Ask me all about it. I love talking to people about
Good.
it.
We need more people like you around.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you can clone me, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how well that would go. But anyways, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm going to close with what I usually close with, which is that this is not medical advice and that neither of us are doctors. And so if you are having a problem, please go and, especially with your hearing, go and get an appointment and talk to someone who is trained and licensed to do this. So with that, I will say goodbye and thank you one more time to Jenna. And I will talk to everybody else next week.